The next thing that I want to talk about is auto orient. So let me go ahead and delete this shape layer. I'm going to go ahead and draw an arrow. I can do that by drawing a star. And while my mouse button is still down, I'm going to use my down arrow, which will make sure that I only have now 3 sides to my star, which means that I have an arrowhead. I'm going to press and hold the space bar so I can move the location of this without moving the anchor point. And I'll leave it right there. Now I'm going to grab my rectangle tool to draw the body of the arrow. And that's pretty good, right there. Now I can select the shape layer. I will rename it Arrow. And I'm going to get rid of the stroke by going here, clicking on the word stroke, and just clicking on this icon for none. And I'll click OK. We will be talking about shape layers a little bit later on. I'll switch tools now to the selection tool. I'm going to make this arrow a little bit smaller. S for scale, and there you go. I want for my arrow to go around on an ellipse shape. So I'm going to go ahead and create a solid so that I can draw an ellipse mask. As we saw before, we can use the mask path for position keyframes. The shortcut to create a solid is Control or Command Y. The color doesn't matter, just click OK. And now I'm going to grab the ellipse tool and draw my ellipse. And that's about good right there. I'll press M for mask. Click on the words mask path and copy. Control or Command C. I can now delete that layer. I don't need it. I'll select the arrow layer, press P for position. And I'll move the CTI to the beginning. I'll click on the word position, and now I will paste, which is Control or Command V. And there you go. I can make these last longer or shorter, so I can change the speed, no problem. And I'm going to shorten the work area bar. I'll position the CTI where I want it, and then I'll press the letter N. And there you go. I'm going to go ahead and do a RAM preview of this. And the first thing that comes to mind is that this is going backwards. So I'm going to select all of the keyframes by clicking on the word position. And now I'm going to go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Time Reverse Keyframes. Now it's going to go clockwise. It would be even better if the arrow were always pointing to where it's going. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the arrow layer. That just means selecting it. Now I'm going to go to Layer, Transform, and I'll choose Auto Orient. In here, I will indicate that I want it to orient along the path, and I'll click OK. And there you go. If I RAM preview, you're going to see that the arrow is always pointing to where it's going. What is happening is that After Effects will choose a point to the right of the anchor point to make sure that it's always pointing that way. And what you can do if your layer is not pointing to where it needs to be pointing, all you have to do is globally change the rotation value and your layer will always point to where it needs to point. For example, I can make this arrow point backwards by just pressing the letter R. Now I can scrub this number. And there you go. If I RAM preview, it will always go backwards. I'm going to go ahead and undo this. Now I would like for this arrow to orbit around a column. So I'm going to go ahead and create a column. I'll use my rectangle tool and just create it here. There you go. And I'm going to make it green. And I'm going to rename the layer Column. And there you go. Now, at this point in time, I would like for the arrow to be in front of the column, so I'm just going to move the arrow on top here. But at this point in time, I would like for the arrow to be behind the column because I want to give the illusion of orbiting. So I will select the arrow layer and I'm going to go to Edit, Split Layer. What splitting the layer does is that it creates a duplicate of the layer with adjacent in and out points. In other words, the arrow layer, the original one, ends at the point in time where the CTI is. And the duplicate layer, which is arrow 2, will start at that very same frame. So all I have to do is move this arrow 2 layer underneath the column layer, and now it's going to be behind it. At this point in time, when it's about to go back here, I need to make sure that the layer is on top again, so I will split it again. With the layer selected, and it is Edit, Split Layer, and now I'll move this one on top of the column. In front, behind, etc., etc. Splitting the layer also lets you keyframe things that are otherwise unkeyframeable. For example, I'm going to go ahead and create a new composition, and I'm going to make a solid. Control or Command Y is the shortcut, and green is fine. And now I'll make another solid. Again, Control or Command Y, and this time I'm going to make the layer blue. I cannot keyframe the color of a solid. However, I can keyframe its opacity. So I can keyframe blue in opacity, and I'll press the letter T for opacity so that it starts at 0 and in here goes to 100, right? And there you go. Now it looks like the solid is changing color, even though it isn't. Well, I can do the same thing by splitting the layer. For example, if I have a mask that is interpolating, I'll create a solid for it, and now I'll create a circle. I'll press M to reveal the mask path property. And maybe I want this to interpolate to a square. So I'll double click it, target mask 1, and now I'll draw the square. And as interpolates, I would want for this layer to go from blue to green. All I have to do is split it at the point in time where I want for it to start turning green. So say it's around here at timecode 115. Edit, Split Layer. I'll change the color of that solid. Layer, Solid Settings, and I'll make it green. And now I have two identical layers with exactly the same masks and keyframes, one blue and one green. I will elongate this one a little bit more, and now I'm going to keyframe the opacity of the green layer. So I'll select the green solid and press the letter T. I'll keyframe and change the value to 0. I'll move in time and I'll change the value again to 100, and there you go. What I have now is a mask interpolation that is changing color as it interpolates. So think of splitting the layer as one of the ways that you have to keyframe things that are otherwise unkeyframeable.